hello everyone. Today we have another RBI Grade B topper with us, Miss Arbina. The best thing about her is that was her third attempt in RBI. On first attempt, she was not able to clear pre. On her second attempt, she was not able to clear mains, but on her third attempt, not only she cleared her examination, but she scored rank second in the RBI. Lesson, you are not going to learn only how to crack this examination, but you are directly going to learn how you can ace this examination. So first of all, I welcome you, ma'am, and we are very lucky to have you today in our platform. We are here to celebrate your success and we are going to learn a lot from this session. But first, again, I like to congratulate you from EduTap side, from all the students who are watching this interview. So welcome.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And hi, everyone, to whoever is watching this session. Hi to the EduTap team. It's really a pleasure and honor to be here.
So when we are talking about your journey, so we have talked before. So here you graduated from law school and actually good in your studies. Then you joined the workforce and you were corporate lawyers. Then you left the job and you kept preparing for RBI. And then you again joined the job. And along with your job, you prepared for RBI again. In your first job, you were not able to clear pre. And with your second job, you got ranked second. I think that's some great character development and it shows that you have put a lot of hard work there. But the basic question comes is you had a really great future in your own field. What was that perspective of RBI that attracted you and you started to prepare?
Right. So I agree. I mean, people who are graduating from law schools, they do have some bright prospects ahead of them. And especially if they're in the corporate field, I think there's a lot of learning and there's a lot of, material, abundance to be built in that field. And I think people who are following that, it's not easy. It's a very tough, competitive road. And to be honest, I would have to mention that during my fourth year, after I bagged a job, and bagging that placement was important for me because of personal financial reasons. I am, the single child of my family, of my parents. So it was very important to me that I make sure that my career was not dependent on, examinations or something that might not work out or may work out. So it was important. But after I bagged that job, I was clear that I wanted to be in this sector, in the public sector, and I prepared for it. And I joined the workforce after my graduation, but this thought that I ultimately need to be working alongside so that I can join the sector that I really want to work in was always there at the back of my mind. So it wasn't like the corporate sector I had chosen already and then I made a switch because of something. I think the public sector was always my, ultimate goal. And the job was something that I had to do like every adult. And yeah, and if you're talking about the switch from law to RBI, I think I should mention that so economic policy as an area was always very interesting to me since college, and its impact on empowerment of individuals because the kind of middle class background that I have grown up in. So CSC, civil services, was like many of my peers. It was on my radar. I prepared for it for a bit also, and like fortunately, I would say soon enough, I realized that my area of interest was much narrower. I actually wanted to work and learn about the economy much more than other aspects of governance that civil services, offers. So then I realized that there is this job, and working with the central bank of the country seemed like just the perfect place to learn and do in this sector, and hence shift to RBI fully from my fifth year onwards. I started thinking about it and preparing towards this.
Like you have prepared without job also and you have prepared with job also. Both I think have their pros and cons. In one aspect, you get time to prepare well, but on the other hand, if you are preparing with a job, you get that financial stability. People are in that boat where they are thinking, okay, should I leave the job for preparation or should I stay in the job for preparation? I think you would be the best person to guide them.
So I think this question, ma'am, even though it's very important, I think it is extremely contingent on what one's personal circumstances are. And if you are somebody who's very young, who's just starting out, and it's financially feasible for you to leave, like basically not work for some considerable amount of time, and you think that even if you do like your job, but you're not going to get the kind of environment where you can prepare for the sector, then sure, go ahead. You can leave your job. But having said that, I feel like leaving your job is neither a necessity nor is it sufficient. So you have to be clear that even if you're doing it with your job, now it could be that you have your reasons that you need to provide for your family, or just generally you are someone who does not like to be without a job. Now that we're all adults, so many of like my peers prefer to do it with jobs, and that is completely more than all right. So I think if you're doing it with a job, the only thing that you need to keep in mind is you need to be much more consistent, because you won't have the time to like waste a day and then, okay, I'm just going to pick it up on the next day. You don't have that luxury, right? Because you have other commitments. And I would also like to mention that it's not just like a financial job that I'm talking about. Even if you are someone who looks after your domestic affairs, that's also equivalent to a full-time job. And if you're preparing alongside that, I would say what you need to keep in mind is you need to be much more consistent, and you maybe have to start a bit earlier than others so that you can cover the entire syllabus in a timely manner. And if, as long as you're doing that, I think you're on the right track. And if it is possible, just take a few days off before each phase so that you're in that mindset when you're writing the paper, that in that 2-3 day time period is extremely important, be it for revision or just for quick tests and all. So if that is feasible for you, do take a couple of days off before each phase. But apart from that, it's completely all right if you do it either ways.
So while they're preparing for this particular examination, what are the other points they need to keep in mind before, they go on ki, okay, I'm going to read this and that on a daily basis? Some points they need to keep in mind and follow.
Hmm. Okay. So before I actually come to that, I think people who are preparing for it, they already know that there are some basic things that you need to do. For example, shortlist your sources, stick to your sources, and all of those things. But even before that, I think one very crucial thing that I would like to convey, and I have learned this as part of my own journey, is don't be over, if you're a working candidate, don't be overly harsh with yourself. Because yeah, you need to be consistent. Yeah, you need to be accountable to yourself. And if something is not working out, you need to pivot and change your, strategy. But if you're being too harsh with yourself, what that leads to is a burnout. And that is not efficient. That's not something that's going to help you. Secondly, please do not compare your progress with those of full-time aspirants, because for very obvious reasons, your journey, like the journeys of the two sets of candidates, will be very different from each other. And as long as you have made a good plan covering your entire syllabus, covering all bases, and scheduled regular tests to see how you're progressing, and as long as you're sticking to that plan, I think you are doing great. So don't compare your journey with others who do not probably have the same kind of commitment or demands on their time as you do. And thirdly, if it is possible for you, again, try starting your day with a couple of hours of study in the morning before you go for work. Like that could be just reading the newspaper or half an hour of doing GK or whatever, taking a quiz. So why it is important is it keeps you on track for the rest of the day, so that you understand that, okay, I'm doing the most important thing for me in the day before I go out for work or do the other things that need my commitment. If you do this, then I think you are in the right, you're setting the priorities right. So whenever you have some time, it'll be at the back of your head that, okay, I need to do this. So I think these things can really help.
When you talked about newspaper, I remember you said ki, okay, I was little slow while I was taking a long reading the newspaper. But does newspaper prove to be useful while you were preparing?
110%. I would not like to like break it down to phase one, phase two, phase
Mhm.
three. Just if you are planning to be a part of RBI, get into the habit of reading the newspaper. In fact, I would say the sooner you start, the better, because for this examination, I don't want to get like overly philosophical or anything, but just um, doing a very mechanical type of preparation is not enough. You need to, at the end of the day, you need to have your heart in it. Okay, so if you read the newspaper, it somehow helps you build that information structure at the back of your mind. So whatever you read, even for schemes or whatever, that's just going to get added into that structure, rather than you're doing very you know like discrete pieces of data you're trying to remember in order to
Mm.
ace your test. So newspaper reading will definitely help, if not in phase one, just generally till you actually clear your interview, it's going to be helpful. And yeah, you're right, ma'am. I used to take a lot of time in reading the newspaper, but I don't regret it. Even though then I used to feel like, okay, what am I going to do? Like if I'm spending 2 hours to read a full newspaper, is it really helpful? But I think if you cannot devote 2 hours or like 1 hour as you're getting closer to the examination, do give a couple of important articles, a read. That's going to be helpful. Yeah.
Right. So it might take 1 hour or 2 hour, but newspaper will prove to be worthy. So one should go for that. Now, when we are talking about this journey, you are a working aspirant. How did you motivate yourself? Because I know when we are talking about this preparation journey, it is not all flowery path. We have our ups, we have our downs. So in your preparation journey, what were your lowest point and how did you manage to come out of those points, deal with the exhaustion and prepare for this examination?
Right. So I think more than exhaustion, the days when I used to be exhausted from my work, I have to be pretty honest. There were days when I didn't find the time to study, and that would really frustrate me because I knew that this is something that I had to do, and I couldn't find the time to study. So and so I think that was one of the reasons why before my second attempt, I had quit my first job because it was in a very demanding sector. And
Mhm.
so I quit my job around 4 months before my examination, my second phase, I think. And as you mentioned, after I failed to make it through the second time and having just quit my job, it was one of the lowest points in my own journey. And uh, yeah, like at that point, I thought that, instead of actually looking at like rationally analyzing why I failed, I started to think that this is not for me, and I've made a blunder about leaving my job because now, I'm without job. I'm taking a break from my career, and thing is just not going to work out. I've tried so much, and I still didn't make it. I'm not going to do it. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. All these sort of doubts crept in, and I was on a phone call with one of my closest friends, and I was telling my friend about all of this, about what was going on in my mind, and about maybe I shouldn't prepare for it now or worth it. So that person just randomly told me that they are sending me a tablet device which they want me to use for the next attempt. And that was very unexpected. It was a huge gift. I didn't expect any of this. And the sole reason that person did this was to remind me that, listen, you can't even afford to think like this. I want you to give your all, and I want you to leave no stones unturned for this next round of preparation. And that was one of those moments that helped me not lose sight of the ultimate goal that I had. That, yeah, fine, I'm dealing with this. I'll have to find a job. I probably cannot go back to my old job. But you know what? This is something that I still want. And if I give up on this at this moment, I'm going to regret it. And I should also mention the role of my mother here. So during that time when I was out of job and I just was criticizing myself a lot about not making it through, she didn't allow me to look at this failure as a judgment on who I was. She actually told me that it's reflective of my poor strategy choices, and she told me that you need to re-strategize and do better this time, and you should give one last full attempt at this, and if you don't make it this time, then you can think about doing something else with your life. And I think these were like a few people in my life who told me that, hey, listen, I know you want to do this and you can't give up, and we'll help you the way that we can so that you can continue on your journey. So been very fortunate regarding that.
Right. I think having that healthy support system is very great, and the gesture was very kind, and it shows that they have believe in you. And let me tell our viewers one more thing, that Arbina's mom actually helped her strategize very well. She used to push her, give mocks, because when we'll be learning about her mistakes in the earlier attempt, one mistake will be not giving the mocks. So it was actually her mom that forces her, okay, you cannot be confident, give mocks. So when we are talking about this, let's talk about the mistakes that you have made in the earlier journey, and what changes did you made ultimately in your third attempt that helped you to crack this exam?
Okay, ma'am. So I started my first attempt. The first time when I appeared for this exam, I couldn't clear prelims, as you had mentioned, and I missed it by like 1 or 1.5 marks or something like that. But that was not the point. The point was I had had to do a lot of guesswork too. And that was something I obviously knew it's not going to work my second time. I can't like rely on guesswork. And I think one of the learnings that I had was especially was regard to the quant section of the test. And I realized that you need to have a lot, very deep conceptual clarity. The questions are not going to be straightforward, and you need to learn a lot about time management, about selection of questions. So, you know, just get to it, like get your concepts clear so that you know that even if the questions are being asked in a way that you haven't encountered during your practice, you would know how to tackle them. And lots of practice would be required in order to actually manage your time, because you're not expected to solve 30 questions. That was a big revelation, that you're not expected to solve all the questions in that 25-minute window. So, you know, accepting that. Second learning was with regard to my GA section. So I again had approached the GA to be like, okay, it'll be like a straightforward question answer thing. I just got to know that the required depth as well as the breadth of this examination is much more than what I anticipated. And I, in fact, tell this to some of my friends also who are attempting it for the first time, that you cannot take this lightly. So, you know, these were my learnings. And for my second attempt, I kept these in mind. I did my GA well, and quant also I practiced a lot, though I wouldn't be like, you know, dishonest and say that it was still a cakewalk for me. Quant was still difficult for me. Um, so in my second attempt, I did all that and I cracked I was able to pass to my preliminary stage. However, I think the big blunder that I did during my second time was I studied. I did my theoretical part for my phase two, but I didn't like prepare for it the way that I should have been before my phase one. I took it up seriously after my phase one, and that turned out to be disastrous. And I know, like in many of the strategy videos, Anshit sir and other members of EduTap have consistently made it a point that you have to do a holistic study. And it's just that second time I didn't do it, and it turned out to be like really, you know, the thing that actually broke it for me. So in my third time, I took my phase two preparation extremely seriously from the get-go. I started preparing for it, even like I started appearing for phase two mocks even before I was giving phase one mocks. And like I would just like to mention here that even if you think that you are doing your phase two study by making notes and going through the theory, etc., and you're like, after my phase one, I'm just going to revise it and like appear for test. No, like you should take your phase two as if it's not something that you can take up seriously later. You have to take it up seriously from the get-go. You're doing a combined, you know, synthesized prep you're doing. So that's what I did in my third time, and I think it helped me immensely. Yeah.
Right. So even when the student are struggling with quants, they cannot be like, okay, I'll give up in RBI. RBI is still possible for them. Even when you have fear of maths or you are like, okay, quant is not the subject for me. Right. So out of all the subject that we'll have to prepare, which subject was the toughest for you?
Okay, so for phase one, the toughest thing for me was quant. I think it was I've made it very obvious now. And I think for a lot of aspirants, it's the case. And for phase two, it was management, surprisingly. Now, that's a bit of a surprise for even like my friends. I don't know. They just thought that why was management very tough for me. So, you know, starting from quant, I think the way that I tackled it was um, just give a lot of sectionals,
Hmm.
because yeah, and don't go in with that, you know, preconceived notion that I'm going to do quadratic or I'm going to do number series. And even for your mocks, just see what are the kind of questions they're offering, and practice different types of questions from a topic and be comfortable with that. And as in when you come across them in your sectionals, you will become even more comfortable with the different types of questions that are asked. So be open about the questions that you're doing and practice a lot of sectionals, and that will help you manage your time also. You can target a number of questions and then try to hit that target every time you're giving a mock. So that's how I did one. For management, yeah, I think the biggest challenge for me in phase two was management, and the reason for that was I don't know, like I just felt like my memory wouldn't come to my rescue when I was writing answers. Like I would read and understand everything, and then when they would ask me, because there's a lot of theory, right, and a lot of chapters, and they go very like there's so many styles of leadership, theories of leadership, and they're connected and everything. And when I would go to write my answers, I would draw a blank. It's like, okay, so how do I approach this? And this has happened. I scored very poorly in my second attempt in finance and management. Finance was still okay because you're not trying to recall everything you're studying. You're trying to understand what's the logical requirement and answer that way. But for management, there's a lot of recall that needs to happen. And I struggled with that, honestly. I just wouldn't be able to do that. So I think the way I approached management this time was um, I try to not only create a mind map or a flow chart of a particular chapter, but I try to do that with the entire subject. So, for example, about management, you have the planning stage, you have the organizing stage, you have the directing stage, control stage. So, I would make like a flow chart. Okay, under planning, what are the things that I need to study? Which chapters are falling? What are the main key areas that I need to do? And under that, now coming to directing, if I'm talking about directing, so leadership is a part of directing. Okay, now let me just use really from some keywords. Okay, these are leadership styles, and these are the main leadership theories under directing. Talking about controlling, under controlling, you get a chapter called communication. So okay, so for communication, these are the things that will fall under this. So I try to make a logical flowchart so that I can place things rather than trying to like really read deep 2 pages on some theory, and that piece of information would just be very random for me. I don't know where to put it. But when I did that kind of like a flow thing, like a mind map, and I know that many of the reading materials provide you with mind maps, but I would suggest that use those mind maps for revision and for checking whether you're on the right track. But please make your own mind maps, because that was a thing that really, like, if you're making a flow chart in a manner that is most suitable to you, in a way that you can recall, that itself is an act of learning that will help you recall it later. And I had made like really small, like 2 pager notes on each chapter. And just I used not a lot of description, just broader subheadings from each chapter, so that I can just have a look and be like, oh, okay, yeah, so this was under this was under this. And then I can just also write in my own words also. So that's how I tackled management this time.
Right. So for phase one, especially you said ki quant was the toughest subject, but overall, what were your sources and can you share the strategy that you used to prepare for phase one?
Okay. Um, for phase one, let's first start with the sources. For GA, general awareness, my sources were EduTap's GA magazines, monthly magazines. I didn't do weekly or anything. Monthly was enough for me. I think that was because I also had to manage time for other things. So monthly magazines. Then the schemes document, the reports document, and notifications, RBI document. And I highlighted and made notes, etc., while I was reading them. And notes, not very extensive notes, maybe just note down the data points and mostly highlight in the document itself. For quant and reasoning, I followed a YouTube channel called Merit Shine, and in that, their videos were very, very beneficial for me because they would discuss the concepts and also cover the different types of questions on that particular topic. So I spent around 2 to 3 weeks dedicatedly doing just that, like just finishing all of their videos, so that once I can get this out of the way, I can start practicing them and practicing them through mocks and sectionals. So now coming to mocks, I used a couple of platforms, Practice Mock being one of them, and I think some smart Kira or something. I just needed a lot of mocks because I knew that for English I wasn't using any particular source, and for maths also I hadn't enrolled for like a course or anything, so I can get through these only through practice. So I enrolled for a couple of like mocks here and there. Strategy would be, first I started with my Merit Shine videos and finished the concepts and started practicing. And when I started practicing for quant and reasoning, I started with my GA prep side by side. So I would read and like highlight, and I would do not just the GA document, as I mentioned, the reports and schemes also from the beginning, because that was going to be helpful for my phase two. And for mocks, I gave around somewhere around 15 to 20. I don't exactly remember, but 15 to 20 phase one mock. And it shouldn't like be intimidating to anyone, because it wasn't like I was doing a lot of preparation for it. Was mock was a way for me to actually study. Because this time around, I didn't focus a whole lot on doing comprehensive theoretical study, but more like what is the requirement of the examination. So I did that. So don't get intimidated. Even if you're able to give 10 mocks, that's, I think, very, very, very good. So I gave between 15 to 20 mocks, and I started like 3 weeks before the exam, and I would do it every day, and just go through all the 18 GA questions, and eventually they'll start repeating. So there's a lot of revision there also. Look at the maths questions, not all of like the solutions, not all of them. Obviously, you're not going to do all 30 solutions, and they will take like 6 hours for one mock. Just if you know that I was going to do this question and I have not been able to do it in the exam in the mock, let me just quickly note how they're doing it. So this is what I did for my phase one. Yeah.
Right. And in the examination, can you share some tips that will be really helpful for the students, especially those who are scared, ki, okay, I'm not very good with either reasoning or the quants?
For phase one, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So for quant, I think we already know by this stage that
Mm-hmm.
in RBI, you need to be very selective with your quant questions. So be that. And I would like to repeat myself and say, don't go in with any preconceived notion on what you're going to attempt. Yeah, have a broad idea that I'm going to do arithmetic, I'm not going to do a probability, but still be open. Have a look at the questions and see if they're doable. Okay. And just because you thought quadratic is supposed to be easy, don't what if they've made it a really tough question, and you don't just sit there and waste 10 minutes on quadratic. Be selective, and time management will need to be your thing when you're preparing for this section. And so for that, you can only rely on sectionals. And third thing I would like to mention would be that if you are attempting arithmetic questions, they tend to be a bit lengthy because they're relatively more straightforward. So if they're lengthy, do check your calculations again, because it may just seem like, because the options can be very like close enough. So recheck your calculations if you're attempting arithmetic questions, and yeah, try to hit your target of like a 10 questions, 12 questions. That would be it. For other sections, English, GK, reasoning, especially critical reasoning, I think what you need to be very mindful of is go through the question in the first go, okay? And if you know the answer, well and good, mark and go ahead. If you don't, please leave it. Like, don't like, your intuition would either point towards like, oh, this option, or if it's not pointing towards any, don't try and sit and think about it. Then please finish your round, or your first round of going through the questions, because even if you think you're just thinking for 10 seconds, it won't take long. No, because I did that, and I lost out on a couple of questions, and that's really stinging you, because it might so happen that they have kept it in the last easier question that you could have. So don't repeat that mistake that I did. So go through all the questions once, come back again. It might so happen that you have now been able to place it somewhere, and then it's up to you, like if you want to take that risk or not. That's my advice.
Yeah, I think it will prove to be very valuable advice once the students see the question, and they'll be also able to understand once they appear in the mock why the question selection is very important thing for RBI. That is why I think mocks are very important also, because whatever mistake you want to make it in mock, rather
Yeah.
than these mistakes will prove to be very fatal if you do that in the examination. So when we are talking about phase two, where we have three papers,
Mm.
you have that scar from previous attempt where you gave your 100% and the result was very disappointing. Now naturally, for our second attempt we become fearful ki, yeah, last time bhi to I gave my 100% but I couldn't obtain the result. So this time, how did you make sure, and what was your strategy and sources to prepare for phase 2? And in the actual examination, how did you make sure ki, okay, this time will be the time I'll be able to score very good marks, that I'll be the second topper, RBI topper?
I think it's very fatal to think that way when you're preparing. Please don't. Please don't. And I hadn't too. So okay. So coming to the sources part, I would like to mention my sources, starting with finance and management static. For this, EduTap mind maps. and practice mock study material, because I found them to be a bit on the crispier side, and I used them to make my notes that I did even before I started with my quant and reasoning. Because I was in a very breezy place after I'd done all my Rona Dhona, but I don't want to do it. I was like, okay, let's just start. And I also didn't want to push myself too much, that I just wanted to enjoy the process. So I spent a good 1 month working and just doing finance and management notes. uh, so I made a very like a thin classmate notebook, एक notebook में I made notes for all finance and management chapters. I told you my sources for finance and management CA. The monthly magazines of EduTap, the finance part of it, the notifications document, RBI notifications document, as well as monthly tests for both of these. And I used the monthly test for practice mock as well. And I noted down any extra bit of information that I hadn't covered in my reading material. Made notes of it. For ESI static, now, I have to be honest here that I did pay a lot of attention to ESI static in my first 2 attempts, but not this time around so much. What I did was, for ESI static, I relied a lot on chapter tests. So that too for most important chapters, not for every chapter. So I know that poverty alleviation, unemployment, sustainable development, these are very important chapters. So, and there could be like concepts that I don't already know of. So maybe I do the chapter tests both from EduTap and practice mock, and go through the solutions, and that would cover a lot for me. And apart from that, ESI static is going to be mostly useful for your descriptive, not for your objective, from what we have seen the current pattern to be. So ESI objective ke liye, my strategy was different. I'll tell you about it. So because I was preparing static from the point of view of it being used in my descriptive answers, what I would do is also rely on a lot of my own like Google search. Like if I'm studying about poverty alleviation or unemployment, I would just go to the website, like go to these organizations' website, World Bank, OECD, whatever, IMF, वहाँ पे जाके look at the definition of poverty they're using, look at the definition of financial inclusion they're using, and if I'm studying that chapter, make note of that basically, and chapter tests, yes, and obviously sectional mocks also, but I'll come to that later. For ESI current affairs, what I did was I revised my GA notes that I have been making since I started for my phase 1 prep, like schemes, reports, notifications, all of those. So although notifications is for finance, but yeah, I would revise my notes and continue making them. Take a lot of monthly tests, both EduTap, practice mock, just take a lot of tests, supplement, fill up the gaps in your notes, revise tests help a lot with that. I would in fact just out of habit, I would take a test and just note down the answer solutions, and if there has been an update in the data that I've previously noted down, I would just update it. And it's not a lot. Once you're in the habit of giving a test, it's going to be very easy. It's not like, oh my god, I have to read and then I have to write answers for solution. No, it's not very tough, trust me on that. Now coming to the descriptive part, okay, of phase 2. Okay, before this I should mention, for English, I did not do anything specific. I did write a couple of essays before the exam. Couple as in strictly a couple of essays, maybe two, and two presses, two presses I wrote. And for comprehension, I just looked at what they're asking. I made sure I did my little bit of due diligence, because you can't go in the exam thinking one thing and the requirement of the exam is something else. So whether I have to write it in my own words or whether I have to stick to the language that they're using, I did a bit of due diligence on that, and whether I have to stick to the word limit or not. I just got in all this information and went with that. So I didn't practice comprehension per se. Pressy, yes. And essay, yeah. Now coming to the most important part of phase 2, descriptive. That was, I think, very important for me this time around in my preparation. So for descriptive, I relied very heavily on EduTap's model questions and their evaluation mechanism that they provided, and it turned out to be very crucial, because initially when I was writing answers, I was not writing answers. Actually, I was writing essays. I was deviating a lot and just finding a topic and going with it. Oh yeah, I know a lot on it. Let me just use very flowery language and write essays on it. And I got very, very scathing remarks. And I remember I couldn't believe Like, I couldn't believe that this was, because, you know, I was in for a rude shock. It wasn't coming from a place of ego. It was just, I was not satisfying the requirement of the answer at all. I had opted for, attempted 3 questions in my first ever ESI mock, I think, and I received 16. And I was like, okay, so this is not going to work out. And there were lots of red remarks. But that was precisely what was needed. You know, I got very accurate, very pointed, specific feedback. So I just sat with it, in fact, for one day. I didn't think that, oh, like, this has come in, let me just double down on my efforts. I was very disappointed. I was like, yeah, I don't know what's happening. I don't think I can like ever reach that level. I sat with it for one day, and then I tried to reason with myself that no, there is something that I'm doing wrong, right? So let me see. So, and the feedback really helped because they were very accurate and very specific. So they told me if my answer was missing a conclusion, if I had a conclusion, then what was missing from that conclusion? Maybe it needed to be a bit shorter. Maybe it needed to not include a new point in it, or my introduction needs to be a little bit more on the topic, and you know, my body needs to have a lot more cadence, and it needs to flow. Maybe this answer I could have written in point structure and all that. Lots of feedback, basically. And I think the most important thing here was to not take a huge break between attempting one paper and then the next one. As I mentioned, that I started my descriptive mock before my phase 1 mocks, right? And I think I was halfway through my descriptive. Again, for descriptive, I had taken, don't think that, oh, it's too much. I had taken around 30 descriptive, including both, like 15 sort of, or maybe I'm maybe a little bit less than 30. At least that was a target. So I was halfway that mark before I started my phase 1. And that not having that gap between, like, practice every day is important, because you are learning something, at least in the initial period, every day. And if you are not applying it the next time, it's like you're starting anew, and that's not helpful. So if you apply it every day, that's how you compound, and that's how towards the end you know exactly what kind of answers you want. So even if you're doing pathetically like I did initially, just don't let that there be a break in your answer writing practice. And I would say, like, continuous 30 days of answer writing is very sufficient. And another thing that I would like to mention that was different, I think, about my approach this time, which I think, I don't know, maybe people like me could benefit from, is when I started writing my descriptive answers, I mentioned that I was really bad at recalling stuff and using them in my answers, right? And I knew that there has to be a lot of data points that I'm writing for my answer. But one scheme I had read, some new scheme on poverty alleviation in February's schemes tab document, or one report I read about January's reports document, I can't recall them and use them in my answer that I'm writing on poverty. I couldn't do it. So the way that I thought I should approach it is I would select the questions beforehand. Like if I'm selecting 4 questions for today, and I would be selective in my question in the sense that I would try to select a question that will cover like majority of the topic on that question. So if I'm doing sustainable development, I would try to go for a question that would require me to give like a historical, like, analysis of what has happened and what's going on. Select those questions, and then I would spend around 2 to 2.5 hours on those 4 questions every day, trying to frame the perfect answers. Like if I'm writing on poverty for the first time, I would try to find the best definition for poverty. And then I would also find a PIB article which is discussing what are the steps that the government has taken so far in the last couple of years on poverty. I would see if there is a report that I can use, because I was like, if I had a free hand, I'm trying to make my answers as beautiful as possible in when I'm preparing for it. And in shorthand, I would just note down all that data. There's a recent report, and what are some way forward that has been discussed by some organization. So I'm preparing my answers that way. After that, when I'm done, I would time myself and give the mock. So I think this part of collating my own answers helped me retain what I was writing much more than any reading that I did during my GA preparation, because that I was doing solely for my objective part. I'm doing the documents and GA for my objective part, but for my descriptive, this is how I prepare. Even for management, I would prepare a good answer with examples and everything, and then write it down immediately, so that before my examinations, I went through my answers twice, and that was like a good revision. So yeah, I used EduTap and some other platforms questions for this.
Right. So when we are talking about the third stage,
Hmm.
that is interview. So you told me earlier that before this, you only appeared for one interview, that was for your law firm. And beside this, you had no interview experience. So I do understand that this time seeing your name for interview must be scary. Then how did you deal with that anxiety that you felt? And ultimately, how was your interview experience?
Oh, yeah. I was like, it would be an understatement to say that I was anxious. I was pretty confident till the time of the interview, and on the eve of the interview, I think it started hitting me that nothing I'm gonna say there would impress them, and my choices are like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I won't be able to convince them that there's a reason why I'm doing this, and it just stuck. Like all of it just came rushing, and I was again saved by a friend's phone call. So this friend I had not spoken to in a long time, and I was just randomly, the person's phone call came, and I was just discussing, this is what I'm going through. I feel like, can you just hear my answer once as to why I want to do RBI? Because I feel like that's a very important question,
Mhm.
especially for someone like me who's coming from a very different background. Why RBI is extremely important. So I was trying to discuss this with my friend, and my friend heard this, and the feedback that I got was, hey, you're trying to make your answer sound very polished, and in the process, you're making it sound very cliched. Whereas your reason for doing RBI is very unique. There is a very personal reason why you want to do RBI. You have to be honest about it. And I think that set the tone for me during the interview also. I think being able to just be honest about my choices really helped. And you don't need to justify your reasons to anybody. All you need to do is have a lot of conviction on why you made them, why you thought at that point those were the right decisions. So if you're honest and you're not trying to impress them, I think you're going to be able to do that really well. So I think, yeah. And another thing would be, on the day of the interview, I was again very nervous, and all the people around me in that room were also very nervous. So, I try to just, obviously in a non-disruptive manner, I try to make some conversations here and there, try to see. Because I think not taking that day so seriously helps. At the end of the day, it's just another day in your life. Your life will, go on. It's an important day for sure, but don't take that day so seriously. Just, you've done it, and just be honest. And it sounds very cliched, but that's the answer. Yeah.
I think no matter how cliche it sounds, it was your experience, and it will be same for every candidate once they reach that stage. They'll be able to understand your words better. Maybe
Hopefully.
today, maybe at that time, but yes, you forgot to share your interview experience.
So, when I walked into the room, I'd be honest, there was a switch immediately. I wouldn't say I wasn't scared, but I think they were very warm, very welcoming. They made me sit down, and asked, started the interview with very, basic, just personal questions. And I was able to be honest with them, basically. And I think the most important thing that I realized after my interview was, as a candidate, you need to really know your profile really thoroughly.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that you need to know like all the toughest answers to the toughest questions. So they're gonna like, come with like preparing on your background that, oh, let me ask this question, iska solution to pata nahi hai. Nahi, aisa nahi hai. You just need to be very thorough about, if you have studied a subject on your in your graduation, in your undergrad degree. If you are working in a particular field, then please be thorough about, and you need to be, right. You need to let them know that you have been serious throughout your and you've been dedicated throughout your career up to here. So know your background really well. And they asked me a lot of questions from legal background also. And fortunately, I was able to answer them. So I think that set the right tone. And I think the second thing that is very important is the HR part, like your own personal reasons and your choices, etc. So for that, as I mentioned, you need to have confidence in your choices, and be able to. If you're confident, then you'll be able to effectively communicate the reason for the same. And there will be like questions. There definitely will be questions to which you don't know what the right answers are, be it technical or be it non-technical questions. There will be questions like that, and you don't know what's the right answer to that. So in that spot, what really helped me was being authentic about what I know, what I don't know, and how being transparent about how I'm approaching this question. I'm not trying to sound smart, and I'm not trying to like deceive you, thinking that, okay, so maybe, I don't know, getting getting a twist on the question itself, or trying to say something that is not directly related to it just to show you that I know about this rather than this. No, just be transparent on how you're approaching the question. Be authentic if you know it and you don't. I think that will help you get out of these sticky situations. And the most important thing during interview is when you're sitting on that chair in front of the panel, please do yourself a favor and do not judge yourself if you are not able to answer something. You can judge yourself all you want after you're coming out. In that moment, you're not expected to be perfect. You're not expected to know everything. If you are continuously judging yourself of what you said last, that's just is killing your chances almost. I may be wrong here. So think about how you're going to answer next. Don't sit and judge if the way that you said it is correct or something like that. If something is not clear, trust me, they're going to ask you. They will follow up with you. So give your best. And if you're not, like, I remember I made a very basic mistake, and it was something extremely, they knew it that I said it wrong, and it's probably because I was under pressure. They had a laugh about it, and I corrected myself, and we moved on. So I didn't sit there thinking that, oh my god, how could I get such a basic thing wrong? Because they're human beings. They give you that much grace. So I think these are some tips that I could collect out of my interview experience. And your question as to, well, when I was coming out of the room, what did I feel? To be honest, I felt very like, okay, now this is done. I actually gave in. I had a good conversation with them. Yeah, it was good. It was fun. That's how I felt. Came out of the room.
Right.
Yeah.
So after that much hard work, when you saw your name in the list of final selected candidates, how was your reaction?
Oh, so I was on the date of the day the results came out. I was desperately waiting for it, and then I had to travel for a friend's wedding. And I used to pray that iske beech na aa jaye, because if it's gonna go, the wrong way, then I'm gonna be very upset. And what happened eventually was I was waiting in the airport half an hour before my boarding, and the results came in.
Oh my
And
God.
my and one of my friends told me, some other friend who I was traveling with, that this has happened. And I just told my friend that you're not going to look at the answer, whatever PDF file. I'm going to look at it later. I'm not ready for this now. So the friend was like, okay, you sit here, have coffee, relax. So I'm just sitting there and like reciting the Hanuman Chalisa. I was like, oh, I need to be really like, strong for this. And guess what? My friend obviously didn't listen to me, checked the sheet and just was like, hey, you made it. And then I was like, oh, okay. So I think that was how I found out. And yeah, I called my mom, and she is a person who doesn't easily cry at all. But she was on the phone, and unfortunately I wasn't there at that moment. But it was mostly because she just thought that she saw me, how much I wanted this more than herself, so she just saw that, okay, fine, my daughter is working hard and all, and she finally made it. So I think it was pretty sweet. Yeah.
I think every listener, when they listen your story and when they listen ki, okay, finally when you get the selection, what was the feeling? It will motivate them. It will motivate them through all the hardships. It will motivate them through all the struggles they are facing and maybe those days that we have talked about. Ultimately, from your journey, what are the final tips that you want to share with the viewers that will help them?
Yeah, I think I would say that before you're preparing for this exam, and it's a completely personal opinion, you may actually do something exactly opposite and get all India rank one. I'm not saying from that perspective. For me personally, I feel having your heart in this is extremely important. That is what will help you back up even if you fall down along the way. So just have a strong why you want to join this institution. It's a great institution, we all know that, but have a strong why, and put your heart in it, and just watch a lot of whatever strategy videos like I did, but please do not try to emulate any of those. You should take maybe like one point from even my session that you found most important, or some one point from some other session. Don't try to take everything everybody says. uh, Second, the other thing would be have a plan at all times. Like even if you're not following like 10% of it, be realistic. Okay, I made this plan 2 weeks ago and I've just followed it up like 5 days, and for the rest of the time I haven't done it. Okay, that's okay. Pivot is my like answer for all of that. If you're not going the way that you know you should be, change your plan and do it even like towards the end of it. Don't give up like, okay, now so I can't do it. No, maybe you need to increase your efforts. Have a plan, change your plans if it's not working, and try and stick to your plan. It will not happen 100% of the times, for sure, but try and stick with it. And make sure that you, especially if you're a working candidate, make sure you're going out on the weekends for at least an hour, and that will help you not lose your mind to the anxiety that this exam may put you through. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Arbina. We are able to learn a lot of things. We're very lucky to have you here, and you have given us opportunity to share your success and let us celebrate your success. So thank you so much for that too.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you to the EduTap team again. And it's been, an honor to be here. And I'm very, honored that I'm able to share this with future aspirants. And all the best to each one of them. And thank you for watching. Thank you.